Stop the tape. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. The cameras froze. The audience went silent. In his hand, a sealed white envelope trembled slightly as he stared at the woman sitting across from him. Are you absolutely sure you want to open this? Because once we do, there's no going back. The woman nodded, tears already streaming down her face. I need to know what my mother never told me. What happened next would become one of the most emotional moments in Dr. Phil history. 20 minutes earlier, the show had started like any other. Sarah Mitchell, a 32-year-old nurse from Ohio, had written to the show about her complicated relationship with her late mother. The letter was simple. My mother died 6 months ago, and I found something in her belongings that doesn't make sense. I need Dr. Phil's help to understand what she was hiding from me. The producers had done their homework. They'd gathered documents, contacted family members, and discovered something that would change Sarah's understanding of her entire life. But even they weren't prepared for how this would unfold on camera. Sarah walked onto the stage to applause, her hands clasped tightly together. Dr. Phil greeted her warmly, as he always did, but there was something different in his eyes. He already knew what was in that envelope. And he knew it was going to devastate her. Sarah, welcome to the show, Dr. Phil began, settling into his chair. Tell me about your mother. Sarah's voice was steady at first. My mother, Linda, was a wonderful woman. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 2. She worked 2 jobs, made sure I had everything I needed. But she was also distant. There was always this wall between us. The audience leaned forward. They could sense something significant was coming. She never talked about my father, Sarah continued. Never. When I asked, she changed the subject or get upset? I stopped asking when I was about 10. I just accepted that he abandoned us, and that was that. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. And then she passed away. 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer? It was fast. Sarah's voice cracked. When I was going through her things, I found a box in her closet. Inside were letters, photographs, legal documents, all about my father. And that's when nothing made sense anymore. Dr. Phil leaned forward. What did you find, Sarah? Letters from him. Dozens of them. From the year after he left, then the year after that, and the year after that. 25 years of letters. He never stopped writing to me. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, graduation congratulations, all unopened. The studio went completely silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. My mother never gave them to me, Sarah whispered. She kept them all. She let me believe he didn't care, that he abandoned me and never looked back. But he did. He tried. For 25 years he tried. Dr. Phil's expression shifted. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about a mother's decision that had shaped an entire life. Sarah, I need to ask you something important. Do you know why your mother did this? Sarah shook her head. That's why I'm here. I don't understand. Why would she do that to me? Why would she let me grow up thinking my father didn't love me when he was writing to me all along? But Dr. Phil knew something Sarah didn't. And he had to decide how to tell her. Sarah, when our producers contacted your father, you found him? Sarah's eyes went wide. We did. He lives in Colorado. He's remarried, has 2 other children. And he wants to meet you. Dr. Phil paused. But before we go there, I need you to understand something about your mother's decision. Because it wasn't what you think. Dr. Phil reached under his chair and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were medical records, court documents, and police reports. He handed them to Sarah slowly, carefully. Your mother didn't keep those letters out of spite or selfishness. She kept them because she was protecting you. Sarah looked confused. Protecting me from what? From your father's addiction. The words hung in the air. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Dr. Phil continued, his voice gentle but firm. Your father wasn't just absent, Sarah. When he left, he was struggling with severe alcoholism and drug addiction. Your mother filed for sole custody because there were incidents, violent incidents, that put both of you at risk. Sarah's face went pale. The letters were written during his periods of sobriety. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months. But they were always followed by relapses. Your mother made a decision, right or wrong, that she wouldn't expose you to that cycle. She wouldn't let you hope and then be disappointed over and over again. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Sarah stared at the documents, tears now flowing freely. So she was trying to protect me? She was trying to protect you from a pain she thought would be worse than not knowing him at all. Dr. Phil said. Whether that was the right decision is something we can debate. But I need you to understand, it came from love, not cruelty. The audience was completely still. Several people were crying. Even the producers in the control room had stopped giving directions. There's something else, Dr. Phil said quietly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Your mother wrote you a letter. She gave it to her attorney with instructions to deliver it to you 1 year after her death. But when we contacted him and explained the situation, he agreed to let us give it to you today. Sarah's hands shook as she took the envelope. Her name was written on it in her mother's handwriting. Do you want to read it now, or do you want some privacy? Dr. Phil asked. No, Sarah whispered. I need to read it now. She opened the envelope carefully, pulled out a single page of lined paper, and began to read silently. The camera stayed on her face as emotions washed over her. Pain, understanding, grief, love. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up at Dr. Phil. She knew, Sarah said, her voice breaking. She knew I would find those letters. She knew I would hate her for it. This letter, it explains everything. Would you feel comfortable sharing it? Dr. Phil asked gently. You don't have to. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. She cleared her throat and began to read aloud. My darling Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've found the box. I always knew you would. And I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. I kept your father's letters because I was terrified of what his addiction would do to you. I watched him struggle, relapse, promise to change, and fail over and over. I couldn't let you live that cycle. I couldn't let you love someone who couldn't stay sober long enough to be a father. Sarah's voice cracked, but she continued. But I also need you to know, he loved you. Every letter was real. Every card, every attempt to reach out. He tried, baby. He really tried. And maybe I was wrong to keep them from you. Maybe I should have let you decide. But I was your mother, and I did what I thought would hurt you less. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday you can find your father and build something I couldn't give you, a relationship with him. I love you more than any words could ever say. Mom. The studio erupted in emotion. The audience was openly crying. Production assistants were wiping their eyes. Even Dr. Phil, who had seen thousands of cases over decades, had to pause and collect himself. Sarah, he said finally, your mother made a choice that many parents face when dealing with addiction. There's no perfect answer. But what's clear is that she loved you, and your father loved you. The addiction was the enemy, not either of them. Sarah nodded, clutching the letter to her chest. I spent 6 months hating her, thinking she stole my father from me out of anger or revenge. But she was just scared. She was trying to protect me from something she thought would destroy me. Dr. Phil stood up. This was the moment when he would typically offer resources, suggest therapy, bring the segment to a close. But something made him pause. Stop the tape, he said suddenly. The cameras stopped rolling. The audience sat in confused silence. Dr. Phil walked over to Sarah and knelt beside her chair, speaking quietly enough that the microphones barely picked it up. Sarah, your father is here. Backstage. He flew in yesterday. We weren't sure if you'd want to meet him today, after everything. But he's here if you're ready. No cameras, no audience, just you and him. What do you want to do? Sarah looked at Dr. Phil with wide eyes. He's here? Now? Right now? In the green room. Waiting. He's been sober for 8 years. He has the letters you sent him, the ones he never got to read because your mother returned them. He wants to meet his daughter. But only if you want to meet him. The decision was entirely hers. Sarah looked down at her mother's letter, then back at Dr. Phil. Will you come with me? Dr. Phil nodded. Of course. What happened next was never filmed. Dr. Phil escorted Sarah backstage, where her father, a man named Michael Mitchell, now 58 years old, was waiting. The producers gave them privacy. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When Sarah finally emerged, her eyes were red but her expression was different. Lighter. Dr. Phil walked her back to the stage, where the audience was still waiting, and they finished taping. How do you feel? Dr. Phil asked, back on camera. I feel like I got 2 gifts today, Sarah said. I got my father back. And I got to understand my mother in a way I never did when she was alive. She wasn't perfect. She made a choice that hurt me. But she made it because she loved me. And now I have the chance to build something with my dad. Something she wanted me to have all along. Dr. Phil looked directly into the camera. Addiction doesn't just affect the person struggling, it affects every relationship around them. Sarah's mother made a decision out of fear and love. Sarah's father fought a battle that took him years to win. And Sarah lived with a hole in her life that she's now filling. There's no villain in this story, just people doing their best with impossible situations. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and her father began building a relationship. They met weekly, video called daily, and slowly filled in the decades they'd lost. Sarah also started grief counseling, working through her complicated feelings about her mother's choices. 6 months later, Sarah sent Dr. Phil a letter. Dr. Phil, I wanted you to know that my dad walked me down the aisle at my wedding last month. Before we walked, he gave me something, a bracelet my mother had worn every day. He said she'd left it for him years ago, with a note saying give this to Sarah when she's ready to understand. I'm wearing it now as I write this. I think I finally understand. My mother loved me enough to make the hard choice. My father loved me enough to keep trying. And you helped me see that both things can be true at the same time. Thank you for stopping the tape. Thank you for giving us privacy when we needed it. And thank you for helping me find the truth. Sarah. Dr. Phil keeps that letter in his office. It reminds him why he does what he does, not for ratings or recognition, but for moments when the truth, no matter how painful, sets people free. The white envelope, the mother's letter, and the bracelet became symbols of a family fractured by addiction and fear, but ultimately healed by honesty and love. And it all started because a daughter needed to know what her mother never told her. 3 years later, the impact of that episode continued to resonate far beyond that single taping. Sarah had become an advocate for families affected by addiction, speaking at recovery centers and support groups across the country. She carried her mother's letter in her purse everywhere she went, a reminder that love and protection can look like rejection when you don't have the full story. Her father, Michael, celebrated his 11th year of sobriety. At his AA meetings, he often shared the story of the daughter he thought he'd lost forever, and how one television show gave him the chance to finally be the father he'd always wanted to be. The bracelet became more than just jewelry. Sarah wore it every day, and when people asked about it, she told them the story, not with bitterness, but with understanding. My mother made the best decision she could with the information and fear she had, Sarah would explain. And my father fought the hardest battle anyone can fight. They both loved me in the only ways they knew how. Dr. Phil featured Sarah's story in his book about family healing, dedicating an entire chapter to the complexity of parental decisions in the face of addiction. In interviews, he often referred to it as The case that reminded me why privacy matters more than ratings. The white envelope, carefully preserved, sits in Sarah's home office. Next to it is a photo from her wedding, her father on one side, a framed picture of her mother on the other. Two parents who loved her, separated by addiction and fear, but united in her memory and gratitude. The story that began with secrets ended with understanding, forgiveness, and a family rebuilt one honest conversation at a time.